I crash-landed on an alien planet, surrounded by alien soldiers, bleeding out and wondering if this was how it all ends. Then she stepped out of the ship. Tall, powerful, a goddess in military armor. Her eyes were violet, her horns silver, and her chest. Well, let's just say she wasn't afraid to let her armor show what she was working with. I thought she'd shoot me, but no. Instead, she took me in, to her empire, to interrogate me. And slowly, she started looking at me differently, like I was something she couldn't control. Before we dive into this wild ride, don't forget to hit like if you're ready to see how a human crashes into the galaxy's deadliest empress. Subscribe so you never miss another intergalactic love story, and leave a comment below telling me, what would you do if you were the last human in the universe and an alien empress started looking at you like this? Cole Hayes clawed his way out of the wreckage, each movement of battle against the pain searing through his body. Blood dripped from a gash above his brow, staining the luminescent flora beneath him. The alien world pulsed with life, its ground carpeted in glowing tendrils that shifted from violet to indigo, like a living heartbeat. The air was thick, heavy with a metallic tang and the faint sweetness of unknown herbs, making every breath a labored effort. Above, the sky shimmered like liquid pearl, its auroral glow casting an otherworldly sheen over the scattered remains of a ship. Humanity's last desperate attempt at survival had ended here, on a planet that felt both beautiful and hostile. He staggered to his feet, one hand clutching a jagged piece of metal for support. His transmitter, cracked but still functional, hissed static into the silence. Status report. He croaked, knowing no response would come. His crew, his people, his world, they were gone, reduced to ash and memory. Cole was alone, the last human, stranded on a planet that might kill him before the day was out. A low hum broke the quiet, growing into a thunderous roar that shook the ground. 3 sleek vessels descended from the sky, their obsidian hulls catching the light in hypnotic ripples. They landed with military precision, forming a triangle around the crash site. Hatches hissed open, and figures emerged, tall, imposing, their armor reflecting the planet's strange glow in waves of iridescence. Their skin ranged from deep emerald to pale sapphire, but it was their leader who seized Cole's attention. She strode forward, her presence a force that seemed to bend the air around her. Her jade skin glowed faintly, as if lit from within, and a pair of curved horns crowned her head like a diadem. Her uniform was a masterpiece of design, clinging to her form in a way that accentuated every curve, her full breasts, her slender waist, the flare of her hips. The fabric shimmered, shifting from black to deep violet under the auroral light, and her violet eyes locked onto Cole with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. She was power incarnate, a vision of beauty and authority that made his pulse quicken despite the danger. "Identify yourself and your purpose," she commanded, her voice a melodic blade, sharp yet resonant, cutting through the haze of his pain. Cole swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. Cole Hayes, human refugee. Earth's gone. This crash wasn't exactly my idea of a vacation. Her lips twitched, the barest hint of amusement, but her gaze remained unyielding. She stepped closer, her movements fluid, predatory, and Cole caught a faint scent, spice and metal, intoxicating and alien. Up close, he noticed intricate markings along her temples, pulsing faintly like circuitry beneath her skin. She tilted her head, studying him as if he were a puzzle she hadn't expected to find. "Earth," she repeated, the word unfamiliar on her tongue. "Your world is unknown to us, yet you trespass on the Thousand Realms." "Didn't mean to trespass," Cole said, raising his hand slowly. "Just trying to survive. Not much of a threat, unless you count bad luck." Her eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of something, intrigue, perhaps, that softened the edge of her scrutiny. She turned to her guards, her voice crisp. "Search the wreckage. If there are others, bring them alive." "There aren't," Cole said, his voice heavy with the weight of truth. "I'm it. Last of my kind, as far as I know." She paused, her gaze returning to him, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to hum with unspoken questions. If you speak the truth, you are either blessed or cursed beyond measure, she said, circling him slowly. Her presence was overwhelming, each step a reminder of her authority. Yet there was a heat in her gaze that made Cole's skin prickle. Your fate now rests with Empress Vexara and the Thousand Realms. Empress, huh? Cole muttered, half to himself. Guess I'm in for a hell of a welcome party. The guards seized him, their grips iron-tight, but Cole didn't resist. He was too tired, too broken to fight. As they dragged him toward the largest vessel, he stole a glance at Vexara. She was watching him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes lingered just a moment too long, a spark of curiosity betraying her regal facade. The vessel's interior was a marvel, a labyrinth of translucent panels and glowing conduits that pulsed like veins. Screens flickered with alien scripts, their symbols flowing like water, and the air thrummed with energy that raised the hair on Cole's arms. He was shoved into a holding cell, its walls smooth and featureless, but through a narrow viewport, he glimpsed the violet plains shrinking below as the ship ascended. The crash site, his last tether to humanity, vanished beneath a sea of clouds. Set course for the Imperial Citadel, Vexara's voice echoed through the ship, her tone leaving no room for dissent. The Empress will interrogate this creature herself. Cole slumped against the wall, his mind racing. He'd survived Earth's, and only to land in the hands of an alien empire, ruled by a woman who was as captivating as she was dangerous. His survival instinct warred with despair, but as the ship hummed toward an uncertain future, he couldn't shake the image of Vexara's eyes, sharp, searching, and undeniably alive. The journey was brief, the vessel descending with a smoothness that belied its size. Through the viewport, Cole caught his first glimpse of the Imperial Citadel, and his breath caught. It was a city of dreams, its spires and domes floating impossibly above a sprawling metropolis. Energy fields shimmered around its perimeter, their colors dancing like rainbows caught in mist. The docking bay was a hive of activity, with drones and alien workers moving in perfect sync, their efficiency a stark contrast to the chaos of his own world's final days. Guards hauled him through corridors that seemed carved from starlight, their walls lined with panels that shifted between images of distant worlds. Beings of every hue and form paused to stare, their whispers a low hum in the air. Cole felt like a specimen, the first human they'd ever seen, and the weight of that truth pressed against his chest. They reached a massive set of doors, their surfaces engraved with celestial maps that seemed to move under the light. The guards pushed them open, revealing a throne room that stole the air from Cole's lungs. Its ceiling soared hundreds of feet, supported by columns of black crystal that gleamed like polished obsidian. At the far end, on a throne that seemed to hover above the floor, sat Vexara. She was different now, her armor more ceremonial, adorned with intricate patterns that caught the light. Her horns were wreathed in delicate chains, and her amber cloak draped over her shoulders, revealing glimpses of the form-fitting suit beneath. Her dark hair cascaded in waves, interwoven with jewels that sparkled with every movement. She was a vision, a goddess of war and beauty, and Cole felt the weight of her gaze like a physical force. "Approach," she commanded, her voice resonating through the chamber, both beautiful and terrible. Cole stepped forward, his guards moving with him. The court fell silent, their eyes boring into him, but he focused on Vexara. She leaned forward slightly, her violet irises studying him with an intensity that made his skin burn. "You crash on my world without permission, in a ship bearing technology we've never encountered," she said, her tone measured but laced with steel. "Give me one reason I shouldn't have you executed as a threat to the Thousand Realms." Cole laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed in the vast chamber. "Because I'm already dead, Empress. My world's gone. My people are gone. I'm just a ghost who hasn't figured it out yet." A murmur ran through the court, shock at his audacity. Vexara's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or respect. She rose, descending the steps with a grace that belied her power, and the room held its breath. Most beg for their lives when standing where you stand, she said, stopping just inches from him. Her scent enveloped him, and the heat of her presence was almost tangible. I've done my begging, Cole replied, memories of Earth's final days flashing through his mind. Didn't save anyone then. Won't save me now. She circled him, her gaze invasive, as if she could see through his skin to the core of his being. Your species is unknown to us, she said, her voice low, almost intimate. Yet you speak our language. I don't, Cole said. Whatever's translating my words is doing a better job than I deserve. Vexara completed her circle, standing before him, her proximity electric. Take the human to the secure quarters in the East Wing, she commanded, her voice firm but tinged with something new. Postguards. No one interacts with him without my permission. As the guards led him away, Cole caught a final glimpse of Vexara. She stood motionless, her eyes fixed on him, a storm of wonder and calculation brewing behind her regal mask. The doors closed with a resonant boom, and Cole knew his life had just taken a turn he could never have imagined. The Imperial Citadel was a marvel that dwarfed any structure Cole Hayes had ever seen, a constellation of floating spires and domes that seemed to mock gravity itself. Its walls shimmered with veins of black crystal, refracting the planet's auroral glow into cascades of color that danced across the vast corridors. Cole was marched through halls where the air hummed with unseen energy, the floor beneath him smooth as glass yet warm to the touch. Translucent panels lined the walls, flickering with alien scripts that flowed like rivers of light, their symbols incomprehensible yet mesmerizing. Beings of every hue, scaled, feathered, or glowing, paused to stare, their whispers a soft tide in the air. Cole felt like a relic, the last human, paraded through a world that had never known his kind. His cell was no dungeon, but a chamber of unsettling luxury. The walls were seamless, shifting from opaque to transparent at a thought, revealing a breathtaking view of the city below. Towers wreathed in mist, their peaks piercing the star-strewn sky. A low couch adjusted to his weight, its surface soft yet firm, and a table offered strange, fragrant fruits that glowed faintly in the dim light. Yet the 4 guards posted outside his door reminded him he was a prisoner, no matter how gilded the cage. Days blurred into one another, the silence broken only by the occasional hum of drones delivering food. Cole's mind churned, replaying Earth's final moments, the screams, the fire, the void where his home had been. He was adrift, a man without a world, until the door slid open without warning, and Empress Vexara stepped inside. She was a vision, her ceremonial armor replaced by a sleek bodysuit that hugged her form like a second skin, accentuating the curve of her hips and the swell of her breasts. Her jade skin caught the light, glowing with an inner fire, and her horns gleamed, unadorned but no less regal. The bodysuit shimmered, its fabric threaded with subtle patterns that pulsed in time with her movements. Her violet eyes fixed on him, sharp and searching, yet there was a warmth in them that hadn't been there before. You've caused quite a stir, Cole Hayes, she said, her voice a low melody that seemed to resonate in the air. My court is divided on what you are, a threat, a curiosity, or something else entirely. Cole stood, his muscles stiff from disuse. I'm just a guy who crashed on the wrong planet, not exactly aiming to start a revolution. Her lips curved, a fleeting smile that sent a spark through him. Yet you've done just that. She gestured to a medallion hanging at her throat, its surface dull and unremarkable. This artifact, dormant for centuries, awoke at your proximity. What? Cole shrugged, his eyes drawn to the medallion despite himself. Beats me. I didn't do anything but stand there. Perhaps, Vexara said, stepping closer. Her scent, spice and metal, with a hint of something floral, filled the air, and Cole's pulse quickened. Or perhaps you are more than you seem. Come with me. Do I have a choice? Cole asked, half joking. You always have choices, she replied, her voice softening. Some are simply wiser than others. She turned, expecting him to follow, and Cole did, noting the guard's restraint. They flanked him but didn't touch him. They descended in a gravity elevator, a platform that glided through open space without visible support, the sensation of weightlessness making Cole's stomach lurch. The city unfolded below, a tapestry of light and motion, its beauty a stark contrast to the ruin he'd left behind. The laboratory they entered was a cathedral of science, its walls alive with glowing conduits that pulsed like veins. Floating orbs cast soft light, their patterns shifting in hypnotic fractals. Scientists of various species, some with translucent skin, others with mechanical limbs, worked at stations filled with devices that hummed and sparked. All activity ceased when Vexara entered, the researchers bowing low. "Rise," she commanded, her voice cutting through the silence. She gestured to a central platform where a series of artifacts lay arranged on a circular table. These relics were created by the founders, our creators. For millennia, they've remained dormant. Until you, Cole approached, drawn by a pull he couldn't name. The artifacts varied, some simple, like a smooth sphere of dull metal, others complex, with intricate gears that seemed to move without cause. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, glancing at Vexara. "Touch them," she said, her eyes never leaving his. "If you wish." He hesitated, sensing a test. The sphere felt cool under his fingers, and the moment he touched it, it hummed to life, light spiraling across its surface in patterns that reminded him of neural networks. The researchers gasped, their devices recording frantically. "Extraordinary," a blue-skinned scientist whispered, his translucent fingers dancing over a tablet. "Its structure is restructuring at a quantum level." Cole set the sphere down, its glow undimmed, and reached for a crystalline rod. It too awakened, emitting a low harmonic that made the air vibrate. Vexara moved closer, her presence a quiet storm, her eyes wide as she studied the rod's projections, fragments of data in a script Cole somehow understood. "It's a database," he said, his voice steady despite the flood of information in his mind. "Instructions, maybe, for systems that haven't been used in forever." "How do you know this?" Vexara asked, her tone sharp but tinged with awe. "I don't," Cole admitted. "It's like the bracelet's feeding it to me." He gestured to the device on his wrist, which had clamped onto him days ago, and now pulsed faintly. She stepped closer, her bodysuit catching the light, and Cole felt the heat of her proximity. "You claim your world is gone, yet you wield technology that has eluded us for generations. What are you not telling me?" "Nothing," Cole said, meeting her gaze. "I'm as lost as you are." Their eyes locked, the air between them charged with tension. For a moment, the laboratory faded, and it was just them, two souls from different worlds, bound by a mystery neither could fully grasp. That evening, Vexara summoned him to a private chamber, its walls transparent, offering a panoramic view of the city's glowing spires. A table was set with alien delicacies, fruits that shimmered like jewels, liquids that swirled in their glasses. Vexara stood by the window, her form silhouetted against the starlight. She wore a gown now, its fabric clinging to her curves, the neckline plunging to reveal the smooth expanse of her jade skin. Her horns caught the light, and her hair flowed in dark waves, threaded with tiny gems that sparkled with every movement. "Sit," she said, her voice softer, almost inviting. Cole obeyed, the couch molding to his body. "Fancy setup," he said, eyeing the spread. "Trying to impress me?" "Trying to understand you," Vexara replied, taking the seat across from him. She leaned forward, her fingers brushing his as she passed a glass, the touch sending a jolt through him, like static laced with desire. "Tell me of your world." Cole took a sip, the liquid warm and faintly sweet. Earth was chaotic. Cities that never slept, skies full of ships, people fighting, loving, dreaming. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. She listened, her eyes never leaving his. "And you? What did you dream of?" "Surviving, mostly," he said, his voice catching. "Didn't expect to end up here. staring at an empress who's way out of my league. Her lips curved, a genuine smile that made his chest tighten. "You're bold, Cole Hayes. Most tremble before me." "Guess I'm too tired to tremble," he said, leaning closer. "What about you? Ruling 1,000 worlds. What's that like?" "It is a weight," she said, her voice low, almost vulnerable. "A duty I was born to carry. But you make me wonder what lies beyond it." Their gazes held, the air thick with unspoken possibilities. Her fingers lingered near his, and Cole felt the pull of her presence, a gravity he couldn't resist. "You're not what I expected," he said softly. "Nor are you," she replied, her voice a whisper. She stood, moving to the window, her gown swaying with each step. "Return to your quarters. We have much to learn about you." Cole rose, his heart pounding. As he left, he glanced back, catching her reflection in a glass, her eyes following him, a storm of curiosity and something deeper brewing within. The door closed, but the memory of her touch, her scent, her voice lingered, a promise of things yet to come. The laboratory beneath the Imperial Citadel was a realm of wonders, a subterranean cathedral where science and mystery intertwined. Its vaulted ceiling arched high, studded with glowing orbs that drifted like fireflies, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across walls etched with runes that pulsed faintly, as if alive. Consoles lined the chamber, their surfaces alive with holographic displays that flickered with data streams, while conduits snaked along the floor, humming with an energy that prickled Cole Hayes' skin. The air was cool, tinged with the sharp scent of ozone and a faint floral undertone, a reminder of the alien world above. Scientists moved with quiet precision, some with translucent limbs, others with eyes that glowed like embers, each pausing to bow as Empress Vexara entered, her presence a silent command. Cole stood at the chamber's heart, before a circular table of polished obsidian, its surface crowded with artifacts that seemed to breathe with latent power. There were spheres that shimmered like liquid mercury, rods that vibrated with unseen forces, and a crystalline pyramid that caught the light in prismatic bursts. Vexara stood at his side, her bodysuit replaced by a sleek tunic that hugged her form, its fabric shifting from deep indigo to silver as she moved. Her jade skin glowed under the orb's light, and her violet eyes watched him with an intensity that made his pulse race. "These are the Founder's relics," she said, her voice a low melody that carried the weight of centuries. "They built us, shaped the 1,000 realms, then vanished. Their secrets have eluded us, until you." Cole's bracelet, still clamped to his wrist, pulsed faintly, as if responding to her words. "No pressure, then," he said, his tone light, but his eyes fixed on the artifacts. He reached for the pyramid, its surface cool and smooth, and the moment his fingers brushed it, it flared to life. Light erupted, projecting a constellation of star maps into the air, worlds and nebulae unknown to any living soul. The scientists gasped, their devices whirring as they scrambled to record. "Coordinates," Vexar murmured, stepping closer, her scent spice and metal, with a hint of jasmine, filling the air. "Systems we've never charted." "It's more than that," Cole said, his voice steady despite the flood of data pouring through his bracelet. Images flashed in his mind, blueprints, histories, purposes. "The Founders made us. Your people to rule, to protect. Mine to maintain. We were meant to work together, like pieces of a machine." Her eyes widened, the implications sinking in like a stone in still water. "This changes everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned to the scientists, her tone sharp. "Analyze the projections. I want answers." As the researchers dove into their work, Cole touched a sphere, its surface rippling under his fingers. It hummed, emitting a harmonic that made the air shimmer, and a holographic interface appeared, displaying schematics of technologies long forgotten. "This is a power grid," he said, frowning as the data flowed, "for systems that haven't been active in millennia." Vexara's gaze flicked to him, a mix of awe and suspicion. "How do you understand this? Your world was primitive by our standards." Wasn't my choice to be the founder's tech support, Cole quipped, but his mind raced. The bracelet was feeding him knowledge, as if it had chosen him for this moment. I'm just reading what it's showing me. She stepped closer, her tunic catching the light, outlining the curves of her body in a way that made Cole's breath hitch. You are either a gift or a danger, Cole Hayes, she said, her voice low, almost intimate. Which is it? I'm just trying to stay alive, he replied, meeting her gaze. But if I'm a danger, it's not to you. The air between them crackled, a tension that went beyond words. For a moment, the laboratory's hum faded, and it was just them, two beings from different worlds, bound by a truth that could reshape an empire. That night, Vexara summoned him to a balcony high above the city, its railing carved from a stone that glowed faintly under the starlight. The metropolis sprawled below, a sea of spires and domes bathed in a soft, iridescent glow, their peaks piercing a sky ablaze with constellations. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of alien blooms that clung to the citadel's walls, their petals shimmering like liquid silver. Vexara stood by the railing, her tunic replaced by a silken gown that flowed like water, its fabric light and translucent, revealing glimpses of her flawless jade skin. The gown clung to her curves, accentuating the swell of her breasts and the flare of her hips, and her dark hair cascaded in waves, catching the starlight with every breeze. Cole joined her, his heart pounding as he took in her beauty. Nice view, he said, gesturing to the city, though his eyes lingered on her. She turned, her violet eyes searching his, a faint smile playing on her lips. You see more than most, she said, her voice soft, almost vulnerable. Tell me, Cole Hayes, do you ever miss your world? Every damn day, he replied, his voice catching. He leaned against the railing, close enough to feel the heat of her presence. The way the sun hit the ocean, the sound of a city waking up, it's gone, but it's still part of me. Being here, though, with you, it feels like I found something new. Her gaze softened, and she stepped closer, her scent enveloping him. You make me question everything I've ever known, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was born to rule, to carry the weight of 1,000 worlds. But you make me wonder what it means to live. Cole's breath hitched, the air between them electric. Maybe living's just finding someone who sees you, he said, his voice low. Really sees you. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Without thinking, Cole reached for her, his hand brushing her cheek, her skin warm and impossibly soft. She didn't pull away. Their lips met, a kiss that started tentative, a question, then erupted into passion, a fire that consumed them both. Her hands gripped his shoulders, pulling him closer, her body pressing against his, and the world fell away. The stars above, the city below, the weight of empires, it all vanished, leaving only the heat of their connection, a defiance of every barrier between their worlds. When they parted, breathless, her eyes burned with a mix of wonder and resolve. This is dangerous, she whispered, her fingers still tangled in his shirt. So's everything worth having, Cole replied, his voice rough with emotion. She smiled, a rare, unguarded expression that made his chest tighten. But the moment was shattered by a distant chime, a summons from the Citadel's core. Vexara's expression hardened, the Empress returning. Return to your quarters, she said, her voice firm but tinged with regret. We have work to do. Cole nodded, his heart still racing as he left the balcony. But the memory of her lips, her touch, her scent lingered, a fire that refused to fade. Unseen in the shadows of the Citadel, Advisor Nevith watched the city from his own chamber, his crimson eyes narrowing as reports filtered through his console. The human's ability to activate founder relics had spread through the court, sowing whispers of change, whispers that threatened the Empire's foundation. His scaled fingers tapped the console, pulling up images of Cole and Vexara, their proximity on the balcony a silent accusation. The Empress grows weak, he muttered to a subordinate, a thin alien with glowing tendrils for hair. She allows this human to cloud her judgment, to taint our divine right. The court is uneasy, the subordinate replied, his voice a low hiss. They fear the relic's power in human hands. As they should, Nevith said, his lips curling. The founders created us to rule, not to share power with lesser beings. We must act before this anomaly spreads. He turned to the console, his fingers dancing over the controls, sending encrypted messages to loyalists across the realms. The human was a spark, and Nevith would ensure it was snuffed out before it ignited a fire that could consume them all. But as he worked, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. The memory of Vexara's gaze, fierce and unyielding, a reminder that the Empress was no pawn. Not yet. Back in his quarters, Cole lay on the couch, staring at the transparent ceiling as the city's lights pulsed below. His lips still burned with the memory of Vexara's kiss, and his mind churned with the revelations of the laboratory. The founders had made humans for a purpose, a role that could reshape the Thousand Realms. But as he drifted towards sleep, one thought anchored him. Whatever came next, he and Vexara would face it together, their bond a spark that could either save an empire or burn it to ash. The Imperial Citadel burned in the distance, its spires swallowed by plumes of smoke and flame as Advisor Nevith's forces seized control. The air crackled with the roar of plasma cannons and the screams of loyalists caught in the chaos. Cole Hayes and Empress Vexara fled through the city's underbelly, weaving through shadowed tunnels where the walls pulsed with residual energy, their surfaces scarred by centuries of secrets. Vexara's armor was gone, replaced by a dark cloak that clung to her form, its hood casting her jade skin in shadow. Her violet eyes burned with defiance, but beneath the fire lay a flicker of loss, a throne stolen, an empire betrayed. Cole's breath came in ragged gasps, his side aching from a glancing blow during their escape. His bracelet, still humming with founder tech, projected a faint map into the air, guiding them to a hidden hangar. "Almost there," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Your ship's still intact, right?" "It better be," Vexara replied, her tone sharp, though her glance at him softened the edge. "Nevith will pay for this." They emerged into a cavernous bay, where a sleek vessel waited, its hull a mosaic of black and silver that shimmered under the flickering lights. The ship's curves were almost organic, like a creature poised to leap into the void. Cole's bracelet interfaced with the controls, and the hatch hissed open, revealing a cockpit lined with glowing panels. They scrambled aboard, Vexara taking the pilot's seat with a grace that belied the urgency of their flight. Her fingers danced over the controls, and the ship roared to life, lifting off as explosions rocked the hangar behind them. The Citadel shrank below, a fading constellation of light and ruin, as they broke through the planet's atmosphere. The stars stretched into infinity, a cold reminder of the galaxy now hunting them. Cole leaned back, his chest tight with the weight of their situation. "Where to?" he asked, his eyes on Vexara. "Turithos," she said, her voice low, resolute. An outer world beyond Nevith's reach. For now, the journey was a blur of hyperspace, the ship's engines humming a steady rhythm that lulled Cole into uneasy rest. He woke to find Vexara staring out the viewport, her silhouette framed by streaks of light. Her cloak had slipped, revealing the taut lines of her body beneath a thin undersuit, its fabric clinging to her sweat-dampened skin. She turned, catching his gaze, and for a moment, the air between them held a quiet intensity. "We'll survive this," Cole said, his voice firm. "We've got the Founder's tech, and we've got each other." Her lips curved, a faint smile that carried both strength and sorrow. "You speak as if survival is simple." "It's not," he admitted, standing to join her. "But it's worth fighting for." She nodded, her eyes lingering on his, and the ship's hum seemed to fade, leaving only the pulse of their shared resolve. Turithos was a world of stark beauty, its surface a labyrinth of luminescent forests and jagged cliffs beneath a sky bruised with storm clouds. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and blooming flora, a raw, primal contrast to the Citadel's sterile grandeur. They landed in a clearing, the ship's cloaking systems blending it into the undergrowth. Cole and Vexara moved swiftly, their steps silent but urgent, fugitives in a galaxy that had turned against them. They found shelter in a small outpost, its walls patched with scavenged metal, a haven for those who'd fled the Empire's reach. The interior was sparse, a single room with a low cot, a flickering light panel, and a crate of supplies scavenged from forgotten wars. Vexara shed her cloak, revealing a thin tunic that clung to her body, its fabric translucent in the dim glow, outlining the curves of her breasts and hips. The light cast shadows across her jade skin, and Cole's breath caught as she turned to him, her eyes fierce yet vulnerable, a storm of determination and need. "We'll take it back," she said, her voice a low growl, each word laced with fire. "All of it, together," Cole replied, stepping closer, his voice steady despite the heat rising in his chest. "Always together." She closed the distance, her hands finding his chest, her touch igniting a spark that raced through him. The air crackled, charged with unspoken desire, a need born of shared loss and defiance. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the galaxy's weight lifted, leaving only them, two souls bound by fate and fire. She leaned in, her lips brushing his, a question that became a demand as they fell into each other, their bodies pressed close, breath mingling in the quiet. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, his hands tracing the curve of her waist, and the world dissolved into a haze of heat and connection. When morning came, they lay entwined on the cot, the soft glow of dawn filtering through a cracked window, their bodies still warm from a night that had forged something unbreakable. "We can't stay here long," Vexara whispered, her voice soft against his skin, her head resting on his chest. "Nevath's hunters will find us." "Then we move," Cole said, his fingers brushing her hair, the strands catching the light like spun obsidian. "We find others who see what we see, a future worth fighting for." She lifted her head, her violet eyes burning with resolve. "You make it sound possible." "It is," he said, his voice firm. "Because we're not just fighting for a throne. We're fighting for something bigger." They rose, dressing in silence, the weight of their mission settling over them like armor. Cole's bracelet pulsed, its interface guiding them to a nearby settlement, a mining colony where the Empire's grip had long been a chokehold. The colony was a sprawl of rusted habs and flickering lights, its people hardened by years of toil. Miners gathered in a cavernous hall, their faces etched with hardship, their eyes wary as Cole and Vexara stepped forward. Cole activated his bracelet, its light casting images into the air, schematics of founder tech, records of their shared origins. "The Empire's built on a lie," he said, his voice steady, carrying to every corner of the hall. "The founders didn't make one species to rule and others to serve. They made us to work together, to build something greater. Nevath wants to keep you in chains, but we're here to break them." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, a mix of doubt and hope. A grizzled miner, his skin cracked like old leather, stepped forward. "Why should we trust you? A human and an empress. What do you know of our lives?" Vexara moved beside Cole, her presence commanding, her tunic replaced by a patched jacket that did little to hide her regal bearing. "I was born to rule, but I've seen the cost of power built on division," she said, her voice clear and fierce. "Join us, and we'll build a future where every voice matters, where every world has a place." The miner's eyes narrowed, but others nodded, their whispers growing into a chorus of agreement. A young woman with glowing tattoos stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm in. Nevath has taken enough from us." Cole exchanged a glance with Vexara, a silent vow passing between them. "We'll need ships, weapons, anything you can spare," he said, addressing the crowd. "The founders left us tools, tech that can level the field. I can show you how to use it." The miners dispersed, their resolve kindled, and Cole and Vexara worked through the night, integrating founder tech into salvaged weapons and drones. The bracelet guided Cole's hands, its data flowing like a river, and Vexara's strategic mind shaped their plans, her knowledge of the Empire's weaknesses a blade they'd wield together. But as they worked, Nevith's shadow loomed. In the citadel, he sat on the stolen throne, his crimson eyes glinting as reports flooded his console. The Empress and her human pet have fled to the outer worlds, a subordinate reported, his voice tight with fear. They're rallying support. Let them try, Nevith said, his scaled fingers curling into a fist. They cannot hide forever. Deploy the hunters. Bring me their heads. His words echoed through the citadel, a promise of blood that reached even the stars. But on Turithos, in the flickering light of a rebel camp, Cole and Vexara stood side by side, their bond forged in fire and defiance. The miners' faces reflected a growing hope, and as Cole's bracelet projected plans for their next move, he felt the weight of a new purpose, not just survival, but a fight for a galaxy where no one would be left behind. We're not just rebels, Vexara said, her voice rising above the hum of machinery. We're the future. Cole took her hand, his grip firm, and the crowd roared, their voices a tide that would carry them back to the citadel or to their graves. The sky above the capital world was a maelstrom of fire and chaos, a cosmic battlefield where the fate of the Thousand Realms hung in the balance. Rebel ships, cobbled together freighters and sleek founder drones, twisted through the void, their hulls scarred but defiant against Nevith's armada. Crimson beams lanced through the darkness, slicing into shields that flared like dying stars, while explosions bloomed in silent fury, their light painting the heavens in hues of destruction. The Imperial Citadel loomed below, its spires piercing the planet's atmosphere, a monument to power now caught in the crossfire of rebellion. On the bridge of Vexara's command vessel, a refitted warship pulsing with founder tech, Empress Vexara stood resolute, her armor gleaming with sigils of unity etched in glowing silver. The suit hugged her form, its sleek design a blend of elegance and strength, her jade skin catching the bridge's dim light. Her violet eyes scanned the tactical display, a holographic sphere that spun with real-time data, enemy formations, allied losses, and the faint hope of victory. Beside her, Cole Hayes worked at a console, his bracelet interfacing with the ship's systems, rerouting power to failing shields. His face was taut, sweat beading on his brow, but his hands moved with a precision born of necessity. They're breaking through our left flank. Zara's voice crackled over the comms, sharp with urgency. The rebel commander, a wiry alien with glowing tattoos, piloted a fighter squadron weaving through Nevith's defenses. Vexara's gaze flicked to Cole, a silent question passing between them. We in this now, she said, her voice ablade, cutting through the chaos. Cole nodded, his jaw tight. Nevith's flagship is the key. Take it down, and his forces scatter. She turned to the crew, her presence commanding despite the ship's shuddering under enemy fire. Prepare for boarding. We strike at the heart. The bridge crew snapped to action, their movements a testament to the fragile alliance forged on Turithos. Cole's bracelet pulsed, syncing with the ship's navigation, and the vessel surged forward, weaving through a storm of laser fire. Rebel fighters cleared a path, their sacrifices lighting the way as Vexara's ship closed on Nevith's flagship, a behemoth of black metal, its surface bristling with cannons that spat death into the void. The docking bay was a slaughterhouse, Nevith's guards meeting the boarding party with plasma blades and rifles. Vexara led the charge, her twin swords flashing in arcs of light, each strike precise and lethal. Her armor deflected blows, its energy field shimmering with every impact, and her horns caught the bay's harsh light, a crown of defiance. Cole fought at her side, his bracelet projecting a shield that absorbed incoming fire, his own blade, a scavenged relic from Turithos, clumsy but effective. Together, they carve a path through the enemy, their movements a dance of trust and desperation. We're through, Cole shouted, slamming his bracelet against a control panel. The bay doors sealed behind them, cutting off reinforcements, and the corridor ahead loomed, its walls littered with debris and the bodies of Nevith's loyalists. Vexara's eyes burned with purpose. To the throne room. He's waiting. They sprinted through the flagship's labyrinthine halls, the ship trembling as rebel drones hammered its exterior. Sparks rained from shattered conduits, and the air grew thick with the acrid scent of burning circuits. Cole's bracelet guided them, its holographic map flickering but clear, leading to the heart of Nevith's power. The throne room doors loomed ahead, massive slabs of obsidian carved with scenes of conquest, their surfaces scarred by the battle raging outside. Vexara didn't hesitate, her swords slicing through the locking mechanism in a shower of sparks. The doors groaned open, revealing a chamber that dwarfed the Citadel's own throne room. Its ceiling was a dome of transparent alloy, offering a panoramic view of the burning sky, ships exploding, fighters spiraling, the galaxy tearing itself apart. At the chamber's center, on a throne of jagged crystal, sat Nevith, his crimson eyes glinting with malice. His scaled armor gleamed, and a curved blade rested across his lap, its edge pulsing with energy. "You're too late," Nevith said, his voice a low hiss that echoed through the chamber. "The Empire is mine. Your rebellion is a spark, easily snuffed out." Vexara stepped forward, her swords lowered but ready, her armor scratched but unbroken. "You betrayed the Founder's vision," she said, her voice steady, carrying the weight of her resolve. "This empire was built for unity, not tyranny." Nevith laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Unity? You cling to a human, a lesser being, and call it unity? You'll never hold this empire with him at your side." Cole's grip tightened on his blade, but Vexara's glance held him back. "He's more than you'll ever understand," she said, her voice laced with fire. "We end your reign now." Nevith rose, his blade igniting with a hum that shook the air. "Then come, Empress. Let's see if your human pet can save you." The fight was a blur of motion and light, Nevith's blade clashing against Vexara's swords in a symphony of sparks. She moved like a storm, her strikes precise, her armor absorbing blows that would have felled a lesser warrior. Cole flanked her, his bracelet projecting bursts of energy that disrupted Nevith's attacks. But the advisor was relentless, his strength fueled by centuries of ambition. The throne room trembled, its dome cracking as the flagship took heavy damage, shards of alloy raining down like deadly confetti. "You're weak," Nevith roared, his blade slashing toward Vexara's chest. She parried, but the force drove her back, her boots skidding across the polished floor. Cole saw the opening, Nevith's focus on Vexara, his guard lowered. Without thinking, he lunged, his blade aimed at Nevith's side. But Nevith was faster, his free hand snapping out, a hidden dagger flashing. The blade bit deep into Cole's chest, and pain exploded through him, a white-hot wave that stole his breath. He crumpled, blood pooling beneath him, his vision swimming as the world tilted. "Cole!" Vexara's cry was raw, a sound that cut through the chaos. She surged forward, her swords a whirlwind, and Nevith's dagger was no match for her fury. Her blade found his heart, a single, precise blow that ended his reign in a spray of dark blood. He collapsed, his crimson eyes dimming, his ambition extinguished. Vexara dropped to her knees beside Cole, her swords clattering to the floor. She tore at his tunic, her hands trembling as she pressed them against the wound, blood seeping through her fingers. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking, her jade skin pale under the dome's fractured light. "You don't get to leave me." Cole's hand found hers, weak but insistent, his breath shallow. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice a fading echo. "That's enough." "Not without you," she said, her violet eyes brimming with tears, a rare vulnerability that pierced him deeper than the dagger. She cradled him, her arms strong yet gentle, her body pressed close as if she could will him to stay. "Stay with me, Cole. Please." He tried to speak, to tell her he'd fight, but darkness crept in, and his world faded to the sound of her voice, calling his name. The battle outside, turned as Nevithe's death spread through his forces. Leaderless, they faltered, their ships retreating or surrendering under the rebels' relentless assault. Zara's fighters swept through the remnants, and the citadel's defenses fell silent, its spires standing tall amidst the wreckage. Vexara's command vessel docked in the battered capital, and medics rushed Cole to a healing chamber, their technology a blend of founder relics and alien innovation. Vexara stood vigil, her armor discarded, her tunic stained with Cole's blood. The chamber hummed, its walls glowing with bioluminescent patterns, and Cole lay suspended in a field of light, his wounds knitting under the machine's care. Her hand rested on the glass, her eyes fixed on his face, every shallow breath of victory against the void that had nearly claimed him. "You were right," she whispered, though he couldn't hear. "We're stronger together." Hours later, the throne room was hers again, its dome repaired, its crystal throne gleaming under the restored lights. Vexara addressed the surviving council, her voice carrying the weight of loss and triumph. "Nevithe's betrayal ends here," she said, her presence unyielding. "We rebuild, not as rulers and subjects, but as equals." The council bowed, their loyalty renewed, and word of the victory spread through the realms, a beacon of hope in a galaxy scarred by war. But Vexara's thoughts remained with Cole, his sacrifice a wound that would never fully heal, even as she prepared to lead her empire into a new dawn. The capital city of the Thousand Realms rose from its scars, a phoenix reborn in gleaming alloys and radiant light. Where once war had torn through its heart, new spires now pierced the heavens, their surfaces woven with bioluminescent filaments that pulsed like veins of starlight. Streets, once choked with debris, now thrummed with life. Beings from 1,000 worlds walked shoulder to shoulder, their voices a symphony of hope and purpose. Drones hummed overhead, weaving patterns of energy that powered the city's rebirth, while gardens of alien flora bloomed in vibrant defiance of the past. The Imperial Citadel stood at the city's core, its domes and arches restored, no longer a symbol of dominance, but a beacon of unity, its walls etched with sigils that glowed under the dawn's first rays. Empress Vexara stood before her reformed council in the Grand Chamber, her presence a quiet storm of strength and grace. Her armor was lighter now, a sleek design threaded with silver patterns that shimmered with every movement, hugging her jade skin in a way that spoke of both power and elegance. Her horns gleamed, unadorned but regal, and her violet eyes surveyed the assembly. Counselors of every species, from scaled warriors to translucent scholars, united by a shared vision. Beside her stood Cole Hayes, his human frame a stark contrast to the alien splendor, yet his presence carried equal weight. His bracelet, still pulsing with founder tech, was a silent testament to the truth they'd fought for, its faint glow catching the chamber's light. "We were divided for too long," Vexara declared, her voice clear and resonant, carrying to every corner of the realms through holographic broadcasts. The founders envisioned a galaxy bound by connection, not conquest. Today, we honor their legacy, not as rulers and subjects, but as equals, forging a future where every voice shapes our destiny. The council rose, their applause a rolling tide, but Cole's gaze was on Vexara, her words igniting a fire in his chest. He took her hand, his touch grounding her, and the warmth of his skin against hers sent a spark through her veins. "And we'll do it together," he added, his voice warm with conviction, a human cadence that somehow carried the weight of stars. The chamber erupted, cheers echoing through the citadel and beyond, as worlds across the empire joined the cry for change. Vexara's reforms were radical yet deliberate, trade routes open to forgotten planets, councils formed to give voice to the marginalized, and founder tech shared to heal war-torn lands. The empire was no longer a monolith but a tapestry, its threads woven from countless cultures, with Vexara and Cole as its unlikely architects. Days later, they stood alone on a balcony high above the city, the stars above a silent witness to their journey. The night air was warm, scented with the delicate perfume of blooming vines that clung to the citadel's walls, their petals glowing like tiny moons. Vexara wore a gown of liquid silver, its fabric flowing over her curves, catching the moonlight in a way that made her jade skin radiant. The gown's neckline dipped low, revealing the smooth expanse of her chest, and her dark hair cascaded in waves, threaded with tiny crystals that sparkled with every breath. Cole stood beside her, his simple tunic a contrast to her elegance, yet his presence filled the space, his eyes tracing her form with quiet reverence. "I never thought I'd rule with my heart," Vexara admitted, her voice soft, her fingers brushing his as she leaned against the railing. The city below pulsed with life, its lights a constellation of hope that mirrored the stars above. "You're not just ruling," Cole said, stepping closer, his voice low and steady. "You're building something eternal, a legacy that'll outlive us both." She turned to him, her violet eyes searching his, a smile playing on her lips. "You've changed me, Cole Hayes. I was born to command, but you've shown me what it means to care." He reached for her, his hand cupping her cheek, her skin warm and impossibly soft. "And you've shown me there's something worth fighting for, even after everything I've lost." Their lips met, a kiss that was both a promise and a vow, sealed under the infinite stars. Her hands slid to his shoulders, pulling him closer, and the world fell away. The city, the empire, the weight of their roles. For a moment, they were just Vexara and Cole, two souls who had found each other across the void, their love a fire that could light the darkest corners of the galaxy. When they parted, breathless, Vexara rested her forehead against his, her fingers entwined with his. "Whatever comes next," she whispered, "we face it together." "Always," Cole replied, his voice rough with emotion, his grip tightening as if to anchor them both. Below, the city sang its anthem of renewal, and above, the stars burned brighter, as if the universe itself bore witness to their bond. Weeks later, the Citadel's war room was a hive of quiet activity, its walls lined with holographic maps of the Thousand Realms, each world marked with plans for rebuilding. Vexara and Cole stood at the central table, their hands brushing as they reviewed reports, trade agreements, reconstruction efforts, and the spread of founder tech to heal scarred planets. The room was empty save for them, the council dismissed for the night, and the air hummed with the soft pulse of machinery. "We're doing it," Cole said, his eyes on a map of Turithos, where new settlements bloomed. "A galaxy where no one's left behind." Vexara nodded, her gown simpler now, a flowing tunic that still clung to her form, its fabric catching the room's dim light. "But it's fragile," she said, her voice thoughtful. "Peace is a flame that needs tending." "Then we'll tend it," Cole replied, turning to her, his hand finding hers. "You and me side by side." She smiled, a rare, unguarded expression that made his heart race. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," he admitted, pulling her close, his arms encircling her waist. "But it's worth it. You're worth it." Her eyes softened, and she leaned into him, her body warm against his. "And you, Cole Hayes, are the spark I never knew I needed." They stood in silence, the maps forgotten, the galaxy's challenges fading into the background. Outside, the city glowed, its spires a testament to their shared vision. A world reborn, not through conquest, but through connection. The stars above watched, eternal and unyielding, but Vexara and Cole were no longer bound by their light. They had forged their own, a beacon that would guide the Thousand Realms into an era of hope, love, and unbreakable unity. As they gazed out at the city, hands clasped, the future stretched before them. Not a path without struggle, but one they would walk together, their love a flame that would never fade, a story written in the stars for all the galaxy to see.